Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to this series of Wednesday evening teaching. I call it Experiencing the Buddhist Teachings. Today, we are actually starting on a new module called Finding Protection in Refuge and Karma. But before I start on that, I thought maybe I'll take this opportunity to review what I've covered so far in this course, in the different modules. The aim of this course is actually to see if we can, by revisiting or visiting, if you're new to it, the Buddhist teaching, different aspects of Buddhist teaching, but place the emphasis on asking ourselves, how can I realize or make real these teachings or this in our daily life, in our own experiences. And so I started off the very first module of this series, looking at some of the conditions, the favorable conditions that we can cultivate, we can create, that make it more likely for us to be able to actualize these teachings in our life, to be able to realize it for ourselves. So some of the conditions I thought are really helpful, that we can give some energy and attention to, trying to cultivate, for example, calm abiding meditation, which is really helpful, especially in our modern times, because often our mind, also our body, but our mind, is quite cluttered with all the various concerns and happenings in our life. And so we carry a lot of this clutterness with us. And quite often we find that there isn't that much space actually in our own mind for new things, new experiences to arise, new insights, because we are so preoccupied with the usual thing. We find ourselves been so busy and under so much stress that we don't really have time to pause. And we find ourselves instinctively just reacting in our most usual, most habitual way. So that's why it's really helpful to have a method, a way to help us to stop, to settle back and settle down to this moment, to maybe to release some of these stress reactions, physically, mentally, emotionally. Just let them go. And in so doing, create some space within our own mind, our own heart, to welcome in new experiences, new insights that might really benefit us. So that is the first condition, calm abiding. We also talk about another condition. Traditionally, we call it accumulating merit. Merits, may come across as like some spiritual money, things that we accumulate. But I think of it as positive energy, really cultivating, nurturing what is positive within our own experiences, within our own body and mind. And this become fuel that will propel us in a positive direction, towards fulfilling or actualizing our higher aspirations. And just as a summary, I highlight the importance of really nurturing kindness. And out of that kindness, we'll find that we be able to engage in actions such as generosity, giving. We'll be able to live a life in an ethical way, restraining ourselves from harmful, hurtful actions, instead putting our energy into actions that are beneficial not only for ourselves but also for others, following our deeper ethical principles. And also by nurturing kindness, you'll find that in itself, loving kindness is a very positive state of mind and heart. So that is accumulating merit. Second, favorable conditions to help us realize and actualize the Buddha's teaching in our own life. The third one, traditionally, is called purification, or sometimes called acknowledgement of past mistakes, past misdeeds, things that are sort of limiting us, holding us back, keeping us down. And I emphasize the quality of forgiveness, learning and really working on the quality of forgiveness, learning to forgiveness in different ways. Usually three aspects. One is to acknowledge our own mistakes, things, hurtful things that we may have done, that may weigh on us, maybe. Then to seek forgiveness, to apologize, to ask for forgiveness. To also learn to forgive ourselves for our own failings, for not living up to our own expectations, and most difficult of all is to forgive others, forgive those that has hurt us or harm us. Yeah. So forgiveness is very much to do with actually for ourselves, mainly for ourselves, so that we can move forward and move beyond old mistakes and bad habits. Yeah. So that's the third condition, purification. The fourth is connecting with our sources of inspiration, to allow ourselves to be inspired again and again, not just once. Now and then we may be inspired to do certain things, we have certain wonderful aspirations, but in the midst of trying to actualize it, we find that we encounter obstacles, we have other challenges. It's very easy for us to lose that connection with inspiration. We become worn out, burn out, for example, in the worst case scenario, and we lose touch with the initial inspiration, the basis of our aspiration. So it's very important to reconnect with our sources of inspiration, to allow ourselves to be open and receptive of that positive energy. Right? So those are the four conducive conditions I touch on in the first module of this series. And following that, we start on the different topics, in the Buddha's teaching that has been arranged in a systematic way, a meaningful way, in a teaching known as Lam Rim in Tibetan. And that means, translate into English, stages of the path to enlightenment. Yeah. So it's like arranging the different topics taught by the Buddha in a systematic way, so that when we are learning and practicing, we just learn that sequence and learn to engage with each of the topics and reflect on them, try to meditate and cultivate them, and to make sense of them, and also to actualize them in our own experience. Yeah. So we finished one module, which I call Appreciating Your Life and Death. So in that module, we touch on two main topics. One is, of course, appreciating our precious human life. And the second topic is awareness of our own death. Right? So they come together really nicely, to appreciate what we have had in the past, and also what we have had, what we are still having in our present moment, the different endowments or opportunities all the wonderful auspicious features of our life that we are able to enjoy, and also to appreciate also the freedom. So most of us, we are actually quite fortunate in the sense that we are free from a lot of other conditions or difficulties, and things that actually really create a lot of suffering for us or impose great limitations on us. Yeah? And so it's also important to not only appreciate what we have, but also appreciate that we are free from certain negative conditions or bad experiences and so on and so forth. Yeah. And it's also important to reflect on the reality of death, although it's such a taboo subject, that we try to avoid and not to think about. But death is awareness of death is actually a very important topic in the Buddha's teaching, because as we become aware of death, and we cultivate this, I sometimes call it the light of awareness of death. As we shine that light on our life, on our experiences, that light really helps to clarify many things for us. We see things differently in the light of death awareness. We help us to clarify what is really important to us, and what do I really want to do with this precious human life of mine, and also to help us be prepared for the end that is bound to come. Right? Death is definite. I'm definitely going to die. The time of my death is completely uncertain. Most of the time, I have no idea how long I get to live. And also what is really most helpful for me at the moment of death. So these are some of the things that this topic touch on. And so appreciating our life and death comes together really nicely. Help us to see what is really important. Help us to reconnect with our higher aspirations. Yeah. So that is just a very brief review of what we have covered in this series. And the next few sessions, we'll touch on a new topic, which I call finding protection in refuge and karma. So we're going to talk about two main heading. One is to do with refuge and one is karma. So let's start with refuge. Yeah. So in Buddhism, we talk about this action which we call going for refuge. What does that mean? Or taking refuge, what does that mean? So the word refuge brings to mind safety, freedom from fear, bring to mind protection, support. And that's precisely what this topic is about. When I learned this topic of going for refuge in Tibetan Buddhism, usually it's presented in 2 points. First is what lead us to seek refuge, right? What are we trying to protect ourselves from? So that is the first point is what is the cause of seeking refuge, and usually it's presented as maybe a fear of suffering, or dread of suffering. And then the second point is, well, okay, now the objects of refuge that we can practice a reliance on, that can serve as a support for me, for us. Yeah. So those are the two main things to talk about and to reflect on. And one of the main fear presented in the teachings following, which is very much based on the Buddhist idea of the universe, which is one where they accept multiple lives. Yeah, it's a very Buddhistic kind of belief. So when I was learning this topic, it comes in the context of right after death. Of course, what comes after that is rebirth. And so they present it in the context of how can I be free? Rebirth, we can be born in all sorts of different circumstances. We don't really have much control. It very much depends on, in the Buddhist explanation, on our karma, on our past actions, be that there may be virtuous or non-virtuous, depending on which one ripens or exert their influence. I might find myself reborn in fortunate circumstances or very unfortunate circumstances. Yeah. And so it is precisely out of fear of rebirth in very unfortunate suffering situations, as a way to protect ourselves from that, then we go for refuge. So that is how I learned this topic. Yeah. But lately, during all this discussion and talking about awareness of death, I have observed, and I also observed previously, these days a lot of people will say when we talk about death, Maybe you might agree or disagree. You may have heard that people say, "I'm not so worried about death, but I'm more concerned about dying." Yeah, because we fear the process of dying, that it might be full of pain. How we're going to die, and it is true that sometimes for some of us, the dying process can be a really difficult one. Yeah. So that is one part of the dying experience that we fear, and also pain, fear of suffering, and also from uncertainty or the unknown, so to speak. Yeah, these are some of the things that motivate us to seek refuge, to seek protection. In fact, refuge is not only a topic relevant to the moment of death or beyond death, to rebirth. Even in our daily life, we find that we also seek refuge, because daily life brings with it many challenges, many possibilities of unpleasant experiences, suffering. Yeah. For example, you may find that life becomes stressful, really, really stressful, especially these days with the coronavirus. It might greatly intensify a lot of hardship for some of us. Yeah. And we instinctively try to manage that fear, try to manage those unpleasant feelings and sensations. Right? And you'll find that, at least for myself, speaking for myself, there will be a period of time where I find myself binge watching, for example, YouTube videos, Netflix series, and it would be best if, while binge watching, to have a big bag of potato chips, so to multiply the comfort factor of so on top of binge watching, there's comfort eating. And if I were to dig a bit deeper into what's going on when I do that, I would say that I'm seeking refuge. I'm trying to avoid the unpleasantness of things that's going on in my life. The stressful situations, or could be work or whatever. I don't want to think about them. I don't want to. I somehow want to exclude them from my awareness. And so, what am I taking refuge in? I'm taking refuge in the sense that I'm engaging my attention on certain things that give me pleasure. For example, binge watching videos. For example, chowing down all this potato chips, comfort eating. So that is one way of understanding the topic of refuge, which I thought is quite relevant. So I'm taking refuge in this kind of behavior because temporarily they somehow seems to help me manage my life, help me avoid certain things, unpleasant, that I don't want to think about, I don't want to deal with in this moment. Right? So if we see it that way, then we can understand the topic of refuge is very relevant to us. Yeah. So again, go back to the 2 points. What is it that we are seeking protection from? What is it that we are trying to find support from? And what are the reliable source of refuge? So these are 2 questions we're going to look at under the topic of refuge. Yeah. So since we are live, you are most welcome to post your questions or your comments on the live chat, and I will try to attend to them. And thank you for all those who have left their messages on the live chat. Yeah. So I thought before we go deeper into the topic of refuge, might be good at this point to do a short meditation, a short reflection, as a way to summarize to what we have covered previously, but also in preparation for this new topic of refuge. Yeah. I'd like to do a meditation on asking ourselves, reflecting on, in the light of our understanding of the preciousness of our life, and also the reality of our death, the post-death, which is bound to happen. To ask this very simple question: what do I want to do with my precious human life? Which is a question that explores our aspirations for ourselves. What do I want to do? What do I want to accomplish? Where do I want, or where do I see my life heading towards? Or where do I want to arrive at? Yeah. And I find this question very powerful, and it's good to clarify for ourselves what is really important to us. And then in the light of that, then we can explore what are some of the obstacles, what are the fears, what are the insecurity or uncertainty, what are the things that hold us back. And then we can also explore what are the things that really support us, that can really be a refuge for us. Okay, so the way we do this meditation is very simple, is to pick up what I call a guiding question. So you can change the words. All I'm asking you to do is to just ask yourself this question. Just drop this question, like dropping a pebble into a well, and listen to the response coming forth from deep within the well. So that we drop this question into our mind, into our hearts, and we, instead of working out logically, try to listen to the images, the feelings, the different thoughts in words that come forth from within ourselves. What do I want to do with this, with my precious human life? What do I want to do? What do I want to accomplish? Where do I want to arrive at? So, so let's spend a bit of time exploring this topic. Yeah. So, if you can, join me in this meditation by first adopting a comfortable meditation posture. Like me, you can be sitting on a chair. You can sit on the floor, on the ground, on the cushion. Some of you might, in the privacy of your own room or home, since no one can see what you're doing, you might want to lie down on a firm surface, on the yoga mat, on your bed, on your lounge chair, or whatever. Just make yourself really comfortable in that position, in that posture. And I'll guide you in this very short reflection. What do I want to do with my precious human life? So let me just ring this bell to signal the start of the meditation. So first, allow your body some time to find its way into the posture you have adopted. See if you can allow the body to feel really well supported in this posture. Become aware that your body is resting on a solid, firm, and stable support. One that will keep your body well balanced and safe. And this will help to trigger a natural process whereby your body, in its own time, can start to unwind, loosen up, and eventually settle down really comfortably into the posture. Your body can automatically release some of those unnecessary tensions and tightness. And we can facilitate this process of settling down of body and mind, helping them to change gears, to shift into the meditative state. So we can do that with the help of our breath, our natural breath. So for the first few minutes of this meditation, see if you can return your attention and become aware of the breath sensations in your own body. We may notice sensations of the breath around the nostrils, subtle sensations of air flowing in and out of the body. We may notice the breath at the chest, the movements of the chest, expanding and contracting. Some of us may notice breath sensations at the abdomen, movements of rising and falling. So see if you can rest your attention on some of these sensations of the breath and allow yourself to fully experience your in-breath and your out-breath. Attending to the breath and coming back to it. If you do get distracted, see if you can give special attention to your natural out-breath. Allow yourself to tune into that feeling of release each time when we breathe out. So breathing out is an opportunity to release. Not only can we release carbon dioxide, the stale air in our lungs, maybe we can also, as we breathe out, release some of the discomfort, the tensions in the body. And maybe we can also release some of the agitation in the mind, different thoughts, words, and images that pop into our mind that are not related to the meditation. See if we can allow them to just flow away with the breath. Coming back to the breath, especially when you notice that your attention is drawn elsewhere, which is a very normal thing for the mind to do. And once you are aware of it, simply invite your attention to come back to here and now, come back and rest on the breath sensations. So coming back to the breath, reconnecting with the breath sensations in your body. Maybe you are also aware of other things happening here and now, the sounds in the surrounding, other bodily sensations, including sensations in your own face. See if you are unconsciously tensing up or tightening the muscles of your face. If you do notice tensions and discomfort in your own face, see if you can, when you breathe out and release, imagine or allow your body to release some of those tensions in your own face. Allow them to flow away so that you can welcome in a feeling of softness, of ease and comfort into your own face. Coming back to the breath, each time we come back to the breath, each time we notice the out breath, see if you can see that as an opportunity as we breathe out. And you might even want to say the word release in your own mind each time you breathe out. See it as an opportunity to deepen the sense of release, releasing all things that are unhelpful or unnecessary, helping body and mind to settle more and more into the meditation. So coming back to the breath, deepening the sense of release with each out breath. Feel free to come back to the breath throughout the rest of the meditation, especially when you find that your mind gets very distracted, not focused. You can always come back and rely on the breath. And whenever you feel ready, we can shift to the actual meditation, the actual reflection, asking ourselves the question, what do I want to do with my precious human life? A reflection on our aspirations for ourselves, a reflection on what do I want to accomplish with this life of mine. So I invite you to ask the question, drop the question into your own heart and mind, and pay attention and listen. Be open to the different answers coming forth, the different responses, which may come forth in the form of words or thoughts, may come forth in the form of images, memories, feelings. Try to keep an open mind and make use of this opportunity to explore this question, what do I want to do with my precious human life? Coming back to your guiding questions, when you do get distracted or a bit confused, feel free to just ask the question again. Drop the question into your own heart and mind and listen to the answer. Feel free to create a list, which can be very long or very short. The list can have a single item or many items. It does not matter. The important thing is for you to take this opportunity to reflect, to explore. What do I really want to do with my precious human life? So coming back to your guiding question, feel free to ask your question at your own pace. When nothing comes forth, simply ask the question again. Drop the pebble into the well and listen to the answer. Feel free to approach this reflection in your own way. See if you can explore your deeper aspirations for yourself. What do I want to do with my precious human life? Coming back to your guiding question to the meditation, what do I want to do with my precious human life? You can also approach the reflection from another perspective, another angle, from the point of view of death, in the light of awareness of our own death. Almost as if at the time of our death, if we were to look back on our life, what will we find most gratifying, fulfilling, most satisfied with? What are the things that I could have done or have done that I'm most happy with, most satisfied with, most gratified with? What do I want to do with my precious human life? And then finally, even you have not already done so, review your list, which can be long or short or just one item. Reaffirm for yourself what are your deeper aspirations, what are the various things you want to do with your precious human life. Okay, so that's just a short reflection on our aspirations for ourselves. What do I want to do with my precious human life? And in the light of that reflection, in the light of knowing, at least for this moment, knowing what we want to do with our life, then that gives us an entry point to look at refuge. What is it that preventing us from doing what we want to do with our life? What are the things that are holding us back or obstructing us or may prevent us from actualizing those aspirations? So, for example, if my aspiration is to be happy, then suffering will be, of course, the opposite, isn't it? And rightfully, I would fear or dread or dislike suffering, as well as the causes and conditions of suffering. And this is a very common thing, right? And therefore, I seek refuge to protect me from suffering and the causes of suffering. So traditionally, when we present refuge, the first thing they highlight is the happiness in the Buddhist context, not just the happiness of this life, but the happiness of future lives in the futures. And so, from that perspective, having an unfortunate rebirth would be something to fear, right? So that is for the first fear that is quite often presented, and it is in relation to that fear of an unfortunate rebirth that the topic of refuge is presented. Yeah. How by relying on the objects of refuge, it protects us from an unfortunate rebirth. So that is how, when I first studied Tibetan Buddhism, that is the context for this topic. But I thought maybe it would be good to generalize it, and to explore it in a more general way instead of confining it to simply just fear of an unfortunate rebirth. We have a lot of fears in our life, isn't it? Sometimes we, especially in this period of time with the virus, we might find we get a bit anxious, worried, especially if you read a lot of news about coronavirus. It's almost as if the more news you get, the more anxious we can become. So that has to do with the fear of uncertainty. Yeah. And also this is a time where we most need of something to support us, something we can rely on or lean on, that can help us to manage the situations, the uncertainty, as well as the feelings or those reactions that have been triggered by that. The worries, the fear, the anxiety, quite unpleasant feelings as well. So, first of all, it's important to identify our fears, our sources of fears and suffering. And then it's important to identify the objects of refuge. And in the Buddhist teaching, 3 objects are commonly presented as worthy objects of refuge, and this is usually we call them the 3 jewels or the triple gem, and this refer to the Buddha jewel, the Dharma jewel, which means the teaching, the Dharma jewel, and then the Sangha jewel. The word Sangha means community. So this is the community of practitioners or followers of the Buddhist teaching. So these are the 3 objects of refuge: the Buddha, his teaching, and the community of practitioners following that teaching. So in the subsequent sessions, we will go a bit more into the details of these 3 jewels. But first of all, most importantly, is we need to identify for ourselves. We need to check it out for ourselves. Do the objects of our refuge, are they really able to protect us? Are they worthy objects of refuge that we can rely on? And that as a result of relying on them, they're able to bring us the benefits, they're able to bring us that protection. Right? And in relation to that, we also already have our own objects of refuge in this moment in our life. For example, my bag of potato chips and my all these endless videos on YouTube. These are my current objects of refuge. At certain times in my life, when I'm overwhelmed with unhappy feelings, with maybe with depressed feelings, and I might find myself gravitate towards them naturally, instinctively, and quite often not so aware of what is actually happening, but nonetheless, I might find my attention drawn to them, and might find my attention engaged with these objects of refuge for an extended period of time. So I think it is also important for us, first of all, before we explore the Buddhist object of refuge, to be able to look at and acknowledge and become aware of what are my objects of refuge at this moment. What are the things that I rely on, to protect me from suffering? So there's a question here: does a guru have an important role? A guru or a spiritual teacher, a spiritual mentor? Yes, that is also an object of refuge. The peculiar thing in Tibetan Buddhism is they tend to see the spiritual teacher or the guru as the representative or the stand-in for all 3 objects of refuge: Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So sometimes you may find, if you read up on teachings on Tibetan Buddhism, they will say that the guru is the Buddha, the guru is the Dharma, the guru is the Sangha. So it's almost like the guru is the catch-all. All 3 objects of refuge, the 3 jewels, are embodied in the spiritual teacher. So therefore, yes, you can say that a spiritual teacher play an important role also as an object of refuge. Yeah. But I like to discuss this topic in a more general way. Not every one of us has a guru, and not every one of us are ready for one. So we will just stick to Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And if you reckon you understand those 3, then you will also understand the role of a spiritual teacher. Okay, but before we go to the more holy objects of refuge, I really like to explore a bit the more mundane, the more common, but the very real objects of refuge that we human beings rely on in our daily life as we face our life challenges. And for example, not all, I would say that my objects of refuge, those 2 things, are not necessarily the best objects of refuge. They come with certain disadvantages. Eating too many bags of potato chips are not so good for my health. And in fact, if I were to pay attention, which usually I don't want to pay attention to what I'm stuffing into my mouth. Right? But if I do pay attention to it, I will say, oh, gee, this potato chips taste really awful. It's very salty. It's very oily. It's not that much nutrients. And maybe a lot of chemicals involved with processed food, highly processed food. And the more I chow down, all those calories are not so good for me, isn't it? And all this binge watching that I find myself engaged in, definitely food and silly addictive iPhone games. So there's another object of refuge, games, computer games. Yeah. See, so I think it's important when we are on the topic of refuge to really look into and become aware and to acknowledge our objects of refuge. And we need to look at them closely, right? Because you may find, in spite of, like, I can speak for myself, in spite of studying Buddhism for 30 years or more, in times of difficulties, I forgot about my 3 jewels of refuge. Now I might recite them, or I go for refuge to the Buddha, to the Dharma, to the Sangha. But when it comes to feel times when I'm overwhelmed with negative feelings, unpleasant feelings, the habits of the mind, the habits of attention is not turning to Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. It's turning to potato chips and YouTube videos, and also computer games. But I have made the decision that I will not have any computer games on my devices, on my mobiles, so I can't play computer games. It's because I get addicted to them. And so we also must recognize, acknowledge both how helpful or not so helpful are objects of refuge, and whether there are any other disadvantages that come from attending to or relying on such objects of refuge. Would you say that these objects of refuge are often a way to actually check out from the present moment? Yes, I think so. The common objects of refuge that we rely on are a way of maybe avoiding unpleasant feelings, avoiding unpleasant, difficult situations, a way of escaping from the present moment, escaping from our reality because it's so difficult, so unpleasant. So I used to joke about Bollywood movies, how in Bollywood movies, there aren't that much reality, because if you were to be in India, let's say, at least when I travel to India, I find suffering is everywhere, it's very obvious, and so if I were to go to a movie theater, I don't want to be shown my daily experience of suffering. I want an escape, which is why I pay money to be entertained, right? To escape from this unpleasant present reality into a fantasy. So another object of refuge you may find is daydreaming. So another question, is this why it is said that everything is a Dharma lesson? Well, everything can be a Dharma lesson if we are mindful and aware, and we are able to apply the teaching to whatever situation we find ourselves in. That's true. And I find that looking at objects of refuge can be a Dharma lesson for ourselves. We can ask ourselves, what have I been relying on to support me, to help me deal with difficult situations, unpleasant feelings? What are my objects of refuge? And that says something about us, and that let us know something about our habits. So I was talking about daydreaming, which is also another of my objects of refuge. I am capable of daydreaming for many hours. And if you were to look at it, what does it entail? An escape from present moment reality, a flight of fantasy into an alternate reality which doesn't exist. It's just my own imagination. Quite often pleasant, quite often involve a feeling of I'm in control. After all, I'm the one that script the daydream. And it's a very helpful escape for me from moments or experiences where I feel not in control, where present moment might be full of anxiety and uncertainty. What about the objects of refuge like family and friends? Okay, so there's another object of refuge that we might find ourselves relying on. And so it's good to investigate and say, who are the people we turn to in times of difficulties, and how do they fare as objects of refuge? Are they reliable? Are they trustworthy? Are they always helpful? Or will they disappoint me? Or, in fact, will they, under certain circumstances, even cause suffering to me? Right? So, and I think it's important to acknowledge that sometimes there are times in life where we'll be so blessed to have people around us that care about us, that we can rely on to help us, to support us, to be understanding, to be encouraging. So those are objects of refuge and objects of support that we ought to acknowledge and maybe cherish. Yeah. But we can also acknowledge sometimes that the friends and families that we rely on may, on certain occasions, under certain conditions, may fail to support us, may disappoint us, may also, instead of helping us, may harm us. So that is also possible. Yeah. Maybe karmic links to people enable us to take refuge. Definitely, people close to us that we rely on. If we have not have a connection with them, we are forging a connection by relying on others, by them relying on us, and by us be around to support others or them to support us. Those interactions are also forging new, deeper connections between us and others. Okay? So I think it's really important before we take in or accept the Buddhist presentation of objects of refuge, for us to look around and acknowledge for ourselves what are my objects of refuge at this moment, and to look at them impartially and to see, what are the good points and not so good points, the advantages and disadvantages in relation to these objects of refuge. For example, certain objects of refuge that we rely on to help us through difficult times or tough spots may not be so helpful to us in the long run. Look at it from a different perspective. They may actually be destructive or even harmful. For example, days with substance abuse, with addiction to alcohol, which are a kind of support, isn't it? A kind of refuge. Of course, refuge or protection or from whatever it is that bring us or drive us to rely on these substances. But prolonged use of them, create a certain dependency and also create other problems for ourselves and for others. So the things that we take refuge in are not necessarily most beneficial. Then there's also objects of refuge that fail to live up to our expectations. Instead of helping us, they may actually be deceiving us. They're deceptive. They're not really able to support us. So these are the things that you need to take into consideration as we survey and investigate our objects of refuge. And likewise, hopefully you will bring the same attitude to when we touch on the Buddhist object of refuge. We should ask ourselves the question, is the Buddha jewel reliable? Is that a trustworthy object of refuge? And in what way is it able to support me, in my life journey? Likewise, we can extend that to the Dharma jewel, the Sangha jewel. So these are important questions that we need to reflect on and to investigate for ourselves. Right? So I want to do another meditation, which is to take this opportunity to invite you to explore what are your objects of refuge at this moment? Yeah. And I like to invite people not to worry too much about. Sometimes we do this kind of reflection. We have, especially in for example, this context, like a Buddhist context, we have the so-called right answers. We're not so concerned with right answers or what are the standard answers, but what are my answers at this moment to that question? What are my objects of refuge? What are the things that I habitually or instinctively turn back to or find myself reaching out for, that I rely on, to help me face difficult times, help me protect me from fear, help me to handle uncertainty. So I thought it can be quite helpful and illuminating to reflect a bit on our objects of refuge. And the way I sort of think of doing this meditation is to start off with, of course, as usual, settling ourselves into the meditation posture, helping body and mind to shift gears into meditation, but to bring to mind a kind of association, association we have for refuge, a place of safety, a place of stability, something that we can rely on. We don't have to worry. It's not going to wobble. It's not going to fail us. And by resting on that sense of support, we investigate and say, what have I been using as a support in my daily life? What have I been relying on or leaning against, to support me, to get me through day by day, maybe, or a difficult patch in our life. So that is how I envision, and I will guide you through it. So let's do another short meditation in relation to this topic of refuge, and just try to find out, become aware of our own objects of refuge. Okay, so if you can settle your body back into your meditation posture. I'll just ring this bell to signal the start of another meditation. So take a few moments, allow yourself to become aware of sensations beneath you, beneath your body, coming through at the points of contact between your body and your seat, your body and your ground, in whichever posture you have adopted. Really allow your body to feel that it is resting in this posture on something very solid, firm, and stable. So your chair, the ground, your bed, whichever physical support your body is resting on, seated on, lying on, that is your physical support. See if you can allow your body to feel safe, well balanced, well supported in this posture on that support. When your body instinctively feels well supported and safe, it will automatically begin a process of loosening up, unwinding. Your body will figure out that it is not necessary for it to stay so tight, so tense. Some of this tension, tightness, and contractions are not needed, and therefore it can release them. Your body can let go, can unwind, can loosen up, and release some of those tension, tightness, discomfort, and welcome in a feeling of softness, of ease, of comfort. And then to help body and mind to further shift and settle into the meditation again, let's make use of the breath. See if you can contact the sensations of the breath within your body and allow yourself to fully experience the in-breath and the out-breath. See if you can tune in and give special attention to your experience of your natural out-breath. Breathing out, really allow yourself to feel and be aware of that subtle sense of release each time we breathe out. With each out-breath, we release carbon dioxide, release the stale air in the lungs. And we may also release some of those tightness and discomfort in the body. We can release the thoughts or images unrelated to the meditation that might be preoccupying our mind. And as we release on the out breath, all things unnecessary, unneeded, we are allowing our body to settle more and more comfortably onto its supports, onto its physical supports. And we are allowing our mind to come back here and now and to rest on the breath itself. Coming back to the breath, each time we breathe out, deepening the sense of release. We release our body, allowing it to settle more and more comfortably into the posture, onto our seats, onto our physical support. So our seat, our physical support is in a way our refuge. It's here to support us, support our body in the posture, and we can rely on it. Likewise, as we breathe out and release the different thoughts and images preoccupying the mind, we enable our mind attention to come back here and now to rest on the breath. So the breath can be an object of refuge, a resting place for our mind and attention. And just as by analogy, our body rely on the seat, the cushion, the floor, the bed to support it, to bear its weight, just as the mind in meditation rely on the breath as a resting place for our attention. What are other things in our life, other activities that we rely on to support us, to help us face difficult times, to help us deal with unpleasant feelings, to help us through uncertainty. So what are your objects of refuge? So as we continue to settle body and mind into meditation, I invite you to explore these questions. What are my objects of refuge in my daily life? What are the things or people or activities I turn to at times of difficulty, confronted with unpleasant feelings, with uncertainty, with anxiety? What are my objects of refuge? Coming back to here and now, to the breath, coming back to the question, what are my objects of refuge? What are the things or people or activities that bring a sense of ease and comfort to us, that we find comforting, reassuring, that we feel safe to be with? What are my objects of refuge? Coming back to the meditation, asking ourselves the questions at our own pace. What are my objects of refuge? Maybe a memory can come to mind. In the past, at times of great danger, I find a mantra resonate in my own mind. And as my attention follow the mantra, my mind settles down. I can think clearly again. I can find solution. The mantra is my object of refuge at that moment. At other times, I might find myself engaged in an activity, maybe like cleaning compulsively, feeling really happy at the end with facing a clean room, enabling my attention to be engaged with the actions of cleaning during the time. Cleaning can be my objects of refuge of that moment. So what are your objects of refuge? Coming back to the meditation, coming back to the question, what are my objects of refuge? See if you can, in the privacy of your meditation, when you do not need to reveal to anyone else your objects of refuge, is it possible for us to be honest with ourselves and to acknowledge not only holy objects of refuge, but in fact a lot of the more mundane, not so holy objects of refuge that we find ourselves relying on, we seek support from, we seek comfort in? What are my objects of refuge? So coming back to the meditation, feel free to explore in your own way, making up a list which can be long or short or just a single item. See if you can, as you survey this list of your objects of refuge, also see if you can highlight to yourself what are the common things in relation to them. What do we find in relation to all these objects of refuge? Something familiar, something we seek or look for. Is it a feeling of comfort while we are engaged with them? A feeling of safety? Or is it simply an absence of suffering, absence of fear and anxiety? So what are some of the commonalities you find when you are engaged with your list of objects of refuge? Okay, so I hope you are able to identify some of your objects of refuge, some of the things that we find ourselves going back to, instinctively reach out for, or we rely on to support us at times of difficulties, at times of suffering or pain or uncertainty. And I see this as a genuine object of refuge. They may be right or wrong, or maybe good or not so good. But the fact that we rely on them, we actually use them, shows that, to some extent, they work for us. Maybe there is a price to pay for some of those so-called objects of refuge, a great price to pay. But we have to acknowledge that on a certain level, they must have worked for us. They must have given us some sense, some point of support or some kind of protection, which is why we might find ourselves returning to them. And I think it's important to acknowledge that. Yeah. And that feeling of, some people may say safety, or feeling of being protected, or in my case, I would say the sense of just temporarily the freedom from the pain or the unpleasant sensation, the feeling of great uncertainty or insecurity or anxiety, this freedom from those anxious feelings, even for a short while while I'm engaged with my objects of refuge. So those are the sign that this object of refuge works for me, because it achieves what I'm seeking, looking for. And I think we can apply the same criteria when we explore the Buddhist object of refuge. We can ask ourselves, do I feel or find a sense of safety when I rely on the Buddha or his teaching, or the community of like-minded fellow practitioner? Do I find the same sense of safety, the same sense of freedom from suffering, from pain, from anxiety, or maybe not? So we need to check out on the topic of refuge. Not only do we need to identify the objects of refuge, we also must check to see whether do they work or not? Are they effective or not? Because what happened if, being a pessimist, I say, what happened in the worst case scenario at the time when you most needed it, your objects of refuge fail you? Isn't it terrible? But it would be so wonderful also to find out and to affirm for yourself when you most need it. It rises up to support you. It is here, and by relying on it, by resting your mind, your heart on it, you found that protection that you so long for. You found that support that you really need. Like, for example, I was saying in that meditation of how this is an old story of mine. On various occasions in life, for example, when I was lost in the New Zealand bush, I was really panicking. I was unsure what to do. The sun is about to set. Am I going to spend the night in the New Zealand bush? Will I survive it or not? And this mantra, this Tara's mantra, Tara, a female Buddha form, just popped into my mind, just sort of recite itself. And I find my attention given to that, and how that is such it sort of reassured me. It calmed me down. And immediately after that, an idea popped into my mind. Oh, I need to backtrack. That's how I'm going to get myself out of this situation. And when it works, I have a kind of confidence in my objects of refuge. In this case, I say, wow, it really works. It supports me. It helps me. It serves its function. And therefore, I build greater sense of, as I say, confidence, trust, or you might want to use the word faith. Yeah. So it is when our objects of refuge, our reliance on it been tested, and when they live up to that test, then that's how we develop greater faith and trust in them, and the more we are willing to rely on them in the future. So these are some of the things that I thought relevant to the topic of refuge. And next week we will go into the details of the Buddhist objects of refuge. Okay, so thank you very much this evening for tuning in and giving me your attention. And I wish you a good week ahead, and hope that you will tune in next week. Just as a little announcement, so there's some changes, of course, in our program. So on whatever we planned initially many months ago, now with this live streaming, there's some changes. So do check back at the live stream schedule on VI website, or you can check at this channel, this VI channel on YouTube, where we do our live broadcast. So I'm scheduled this Sunday to do a short workshop over YouTube live broadcast on the topic of dealing with anxiety, with the practice of anxiety and uncertainty, with the practice of Tongling meditation, taking and giving meditation, which is a very unusual, very special and very powerful meditation in Tibetan Buddhist tradition. So if you have the time, tune in this Sunday, 10:30 to 12:30, and join me in this meditation. Otherwise, you can always listen to the recording. All right. Thank you very much for your attention. I'll see you next week.